We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no fluff email that boils down our three biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Andrew Stanten. He is the president of Altitude Marketing. Andrew, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Logan. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we appreciate you being on the show. Andrew, noticed you guys are doing some amazing things. I think it was the Chief Marketer Top 200 you guys were recently listed on, right?
We were. Yeah, it was great to be recognized at that level with that publication.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Andrew, we're going to be talking about 5 things to focus on growing trends of 2019 in B2B marketing. Before we do that, I would love for you to share a little bit about your background in marketing and what you and the growing team that's obviously doing great things at Altitude Marketing are up to these days.
Yeah, great. Well, Altitude is a full-service B2B marketing agency with a digital core. Meaning that it's where we start, looking at things digital. That is the way of the world. But that does not mean that traditional tactics don't still have their place in the B2B space. I started the company in 2004, so we turned 15 this year, which is pretty amazing when you think about the statistics, about how many businesses make it that far. So we're psyched to be here. At Altitude, really, our approach is to take the view from 30,000 feet. We start with strategy, and use that to inform what we're going to do from a tactical standpoint rather than letting the tail wag the dog. Ultimately, we specialize with niche markets or niche offerings that are offering within larger spaces, and it's an exclusive B2B focus with a large emphasis on technology companies. Seems like a great place to be in. We've staffed the team to be able to support that in terms of the folks that we have on board that can understand really complex subjects. And it seems to be working for us 15 years in. So I think we might be onto something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great to hear about your growth. I love that analogy of putting things in the right order, not letting the tail wag the dog. I think we can get shiny object syndrome and get so caught up in, this new tactic that we heard or this new technology and let that drive our strategy. Sounds like you guys are doing things in the right way, which is why I'm excited to have you share your perspective on some of these trends, Andrew, that you see as being big in the rest of 2019. And specifically, I don't think we're going to bring up any trends or strategies that people haven't heard of before, but let's talk a little bit about where folks should be implementing them and ways to think about them that could be effective. So the first piece I wanted to have you share on was thought leadership. Where do you see this kind of evolving and going in 2019?
Right. Yeah. Thought leadership is certainly a very strong buzz term. I mean, literally, someone came to me the other day and said, I want to do this new thing, thought leadership marketing. I hear it will help generate leads. And I kind of looked at him and I said, well, that's an interesting comment, but it's not a new thing, right? And I had to explain that. I mean, it's been a buzz term for years. And, I love, being in the marketing space in particular because there's always a lot of buzz going on, which isn't really surprising considering that's the job of marketing is to create buzz. But a lot of this stuff that we're hearing about and, this comment about thought leadership being new is really just a repackaging of some time-tested techniques. And, I'm not some ready-to-retire 65-year-old fuddy-duddy that don't want to sound like I'm clamoring for the good old days. But a lot of this stuff, thought leadership in particular, conceptually, isn't new, but the delivery mechanism and how we deploy technology to get across that approach is new and is evolving. I mean, the basic concept with thought leadership is simple. I mean, you present someone at your company, and it doesn't have to be the CEO, but it can be. You present them as an expert in the field with a very strong, authentic point of view on topics that matter to the prospects, on topics that matter to your customers, on topics that matter to your industry. You need to absolutely have an opinion, and you need to be, in many cases, be willing to give away a little bit of your IP, your intellectual property, in an effort to gain somebody's attention, mind share, and get them to want to engage with you even further. It's a very smart approach. Some people are afraid to give away some IP. They feel like it's giving away their secret sauce. So there's a fine balancing act there. But this really isn't a new concept in and of itself. I mean, we were practicing thought leadership marketing back in the 1990s in publishing. Back then, we would give away a little bit of advice. I worked at a publishing company called Rodale that was all about healthy, active living. We would give away 3 tips, 3 tips to shrink your belly and 5 tips to become a better cyclist, in an effort to try to get people to want to read the other 50 tips that were contained either in that magazine article or in that book. And we would use those shortened versions of those tips in direct mail efforts, in email efforts, and other forms of correspondence. So it's not particularly a new concept, but back then we called it not thought leadership, we called it service journalism. Now we call it thought leadership. But what is changing is how we can go about doing that. If you go back and think about the rapid growth of YouTube and what that has done in particular, they've made it okay to produce video at a lesser quality than in the past. So thought leadership can take the form of a written blog. It can take the form of an op-ed, but increasingly it's taken the form of a video because those are pretty easy to produce. But they used to be cost prohibitive to produce. You had to go into a studio, you had to have the lighting, you had to have the audio, you had to do all sorts of things. But YouTube has really democratized, if you will, the ability for people with an opinion who are in positions to have their opinion be credible and valuable, get their message disseminated out there in a way that isn't going to break the bank if you want to try to do this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Yeah. We recently had one of the co-founders of Wistia on the show, and Chris was talking about a series that they've done experimenting with different levels of production cost of video and seeing how does that affect the creative process? How does that affect the message? All those sorts of things. And I think there's no right or wrong. There's no black or white that, the more you spend, the better your video content's going to be and the better it's going to perform. There are a number of factors, but I think taking a balanced approach, and maybe it comes down to, as you said earlier, Andrew, thinking about the strategy before the tactics, thinking about who's going to receive this, what is kind of their expectation as far as level of quality and those sorts of things. Oddly enough, James and I did a behind the curtains episode on this show as well, talking about, the rise of LinkedIn selfie videos. And not that we're against those, but we felt that there were a lot of people kind of taking quality doesn't matter to an extreme that really wasn't helping their brand. And I think that the answer is probably there in the middle ground somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you hit on a great point, which is brand does matter. And if you're a high-end brand and you're selling a premium product or an enterprise type solution, you don't want to come across as cheap, right? And so part of that is you could still do things in a way that it's easier to produce, and it may be a lesser quality than a studio production, but at the heart of it, the content has got to be solid. And you can't have dogs barking in the background and trains whistling in the background. It's still got to be audible and legible and have an important message contained within there. But you can certainly get there a number of different ways than you have in the past. But brand absolutely matters. You can't put crap out there, Ryan. I mean, that's the bottom line. You don't want to put crap out there. And that speaks to another trend, which thank goodness is dying, and it's not really on your list to tick off here to talk about. But there was a trend a couple of years ago where when it came to content production to try to game Google and the whole SEO world, that more was better and quality didn't matter. And so you had people that weren't subject matter experts just writing stuff, keyword stuffing and doing everything they possibly could to appeal to the robots or the search engines. But the reality is it did very little because if a human ever read 3/4 of the crap that was being produced,
Right.
it wouldn't result in any meaningful action.
Mm-hmm.
Quality absolutely matters, and if it doesn't resonate, that it does, that it really does matter. I mean, you got to think about the impact, as you mentioned, to the brand. You don't want your brand wrapped up in a bunch of crappy content, whether it's video or written or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're like-minded there, Andrew, for sure. So let's talk about trend number 2. Let's talk about influencer marketing. What's new and what's not new there? If you could kind of frame it in that context as you did with our first trend here, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, influencer marketing, you call it good old-fashioned PR if you want, but the game of PR, and PR does not mean press release. It means public relations. And in this case, the publics are your prospects, your stakeholders, your influencers, the people that can make stuff happen for you. Influencer marketing is really good old-fashioned PR, but it has grown exponentially because of this megaphone we call the internet. I mean, if you go back 10 years or so, people like you, Logan, I mean, you may not have had this platform and the following that you have here, and we'd have to smartly target, let's say, Walt Mossberg or somebody else who was, really dialed into the tech world, and hope you could get, a couple column inches or maybe even a post on a website somewhere. But there was a very small few people that were controlling and influencing the public when it came to certain things, particularly in the technology sector. But once again, the internet and the channels and social media have democratized things, and the exponential reach that influencers have and defining who influencers have is no longer controlled by the media companies. Right? We used to be told that this person, because they're a columnist or they're a publisher or they're a producer or they're an on-air personality, are the influencers in your market. Now the market determines who the influencers in their markets are.
Yep, absolutely.
So for any given space, it really is the people who are following, liking, sharing that are building these influencers up. And so where you used to target very specific people at a very finite number of outlets that everybody knew, it is much more, I would say, fractionalized. But that also enables marketers and companies to focus a lot more, because there may be an influencer who has, let's say, a following of 20,000 people or something, and those are all 20,000 people that actually give a crap about what you have to talk about. And so I think the concept hasn't changed, but certainly has grown tremendously thanks to social media and what we're doing right here, Logan, podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's jump quickly to number 3, Andrew. We've had a number of folks talking about ABM lately. I'm the first to say, having been in the B2B sales world for 10 years, that, an account-based approach isn't really new. It's new for marketing to think about it in the way that it's being executed now. And there's different technologies, but, sales has been doing an account-based approach in a lot of places in B2B, since well before I was selling. Let's just put it that way. But tell us what's new and what's not new in your thoughts when it comes to account-based marketing, Andrew.
Yeah, and first I'll start by saying I love account-based marketing, because ultimately that means you know who you're targeting at what organization, and you have a plan to influence that person or those people within the organization. But what I really love about it, and this goes back to the Dilbert comic strip days, where it was the classic case where there was a wall between production, sales, and marketing, and they never spoke to each other, right? And so production would create something that maybe sales can't sell, and marketing didn't think there was an opportunity for it, or marketing was doing something that production had no idea about, and the salespeople wanted no interest in it. What ABM does that I love is it really forces destruction of that silo between sales and marketing, and forces them to really be in alignment. So they're going after the same targets. They're rowing the boat in the same direction. And there's a reason it's getting major traction. When it's done correctly, it really works, right? But to say that account-based marketing is this new thing and you should be paying attention to it, I say we used to call that sales support, right? Softening the targets, whether that, air cover, to get a prospective target or prospect at least familiar with the brand name or the individual or the product or the offering, because salespeople still need to pick up the phone. Nowadays, though, with the ability to personalize the customer experience or the prospect experience, the use of technology tools, your CRM, your automation, your digital marketing, if you can put together a well thought out plan that is multi-touch, multimedia, and multi-channel to a very specific set of prospects that you've identified have a high likelihood of needing your product or solution, that makes a ton of sense. The challenge is it takes a little bit longer sometimes, and it can be a little bit more intensive in the planning cycle. I don't think you're going to just simply have one touch and get somebody to buy most of the time. So it requires a well thought out plan. We did an ABM campaign for a client not too long ago, and it was a 12-step process with decision trees along the way based on certain actions that were being taken that were recorded either through some of the analytics tools or some of the responses that were being generated. So it forces you to think much more on the front end rather than just saying, hey, you know what, I've got 5 prospects at this target account. I'm going to send them a postcard and then pick up the phone and call them and hope something works. It has to be a lot more well thought through on the front end in order to make it work. But I'm big on this. But again, it's an and both world. And by that, I mean, it's not going to be the be all end all. I think an account-based marketing strategy is most effective when you have other marketing techniques kind of wrapping around that, supporting that, whether it's raising visibility, producing content elsewhere and disseminating through social that gives you credibility, that gets the name out there. And so when the account-based marketing activities start to hit, they all work together. And that prospect says, gosh, I've been hearing and seeing about these folks everywhere. They did a nice job reaching out to me. I got some nice collateral. I like what they're doing on their landing pages. I like what they're doing on social. I need their offering. I think I'm going to take this dude's call.
That is a great way to put it. It is not the be all end all, but when it is part of an overall strategy that you are firing on all cylinders, man, it can be a great accelerator in a lot of sectors of B2B for sure.
All right, today's growth story is about search engine marketing. Clear Company is an HR tech company that was doing a lot of things right. Their messaging was clear, their product produced incredible results, but they were struggling to drive qualified traffic to their website. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first 12 months of working with Directive, Clear Company was able to increase their qualified lead volume by 157%. I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
So let's talk about the next one, Andrew. We've got 2 more left, long form content and long tail SEO. It seems like short form versus long form content has been a debate just about every year. It seems like there's, the pendulum swings one way or the other. Where do you see it kind of sitting right now in kind of the age old debate of length of content?
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it's a tough one to wrestle with because length ultimately doesn't matter if you're doing things right. So the shortest post can have an amazing impact, right? And it can have amazing reach and drive people to action, right? But ultimately, if you're in this for the long haul, you're not looking to just catch lightning in a bottle. You want a sustainable strategy. What I'm going to go out on the record and say is that in 2019, longer form content is going to play very, very, very well if you do it correctly. And by that, what I mean, there are people out there every day who are specifically searching for answers to their problems, specifically searching for answers to what they need to run their business, to run their B2B business, to do a better job along those lines. And if you can answer those questions, specific questions that they are answering, this may take more words to do, but if you can answer those specific questions in a compelling way that resonates with both the machines, i.e. Google and the search engines, and the human, you're going to win this game. You really are going to win that game at that point. I think the importance comes down to quality. I mean, there was a time not too long ago where the name of the game was put out as much crap as you can out there and hope something sticks. And what I would say is rather than try to produce 10 blogs of marginal interest, of marginal information of marginal value, and set yourself a quota of writing these 10. Write one really good piece and make it really dense. Be an authority. Make that page an authority on the topic. Have it align with what you do as an organization and the rest of your website. Those kinds of articles, those how-to topics, those topics that are answering the questions, are really going to resonate with the search engines. And then when the humans hit it, they're going to read this and say, that's exactly what I was looking for. But providing solid, in-depth information to the right people at the right time to increase the chances of them wanting to engage with you, it's not really new, but it is a new concept, as you had mentioned, the pendulum swinging between short and long. I think the real challenge here is to write really good quality content in a way that appeals to both the search engines and the humans, and to be able to do that in 20 words or 30 characters or even 100 words, I think you're just scratching the surface. If you are an expert in a topic, or your company espouses to be a thought leader in a particular space, coming up with those 1,000 words that deal with a specific pain that your customers have, it's going to go a really long way. I think I read a stat somewhere that about 85% of web content is less than 1,000 words. Think about that for a minute. So it shows that people are writing shorter and shorter form. So if the spiders are out there crawling and looking for an authoritative, detailed source that can answer the questions that are being posed into the search engine, in that case, I would argue more is better. This doesn't mean you have to write 10,000 words, and it doesn't have to be a white paper and an ebook, but 1,000 words is about, 2 pages of traditional text is about where we see things heading this year.
Interesting. So how does that play into this last marketing trend that you wanted to touch on, Andrew, in long tail SEO? Because obviously there's some tie-in between these two trends. Let's wrap it out with talking about long tail SEO and where you see that going, what's new, what's not new.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that businesses, when they can, should outsmart and outflank, not outspend their competition, because then you just get into an arms race, and the only ones that really win there is Google.
Right.
And so you want to outsmart folks. And the way to do that is playing Google's game. And so a very real example, as we were testing what we had saw as kind of this pendulum swing to more long tail being an effective strategy for our clients, we had a client, and part of what we had to detail for them, we were going to be launching a new product for them. And so internally, we had to detail out how we were going to launch this B2B product. And in looking at this, the plan for this that we presented, we said, you know what? With a little bit of editing, this would make a great how-to, blog/guide. And so after sharing this, very specifically with the client, they bought off on it. We genericized what we had talked about it, but turned it more into a blog of how do I launch a B2B product, right? Which is a very longer term, longer tail term than we might normally be competing for on our own. We may be competing for B2B technology companies, B2B marketing agency, but how do I launch a B2B product was an actual query that people were typing into the search engines. And we went from not having any presence on that search. Within 48 hours of that post being put up on our website, we were ranking on page 1 for how do I launch a B2B product. And then within the next 2 weeks, we had about 8 different companies reaching out to us because they saw that piece through a query. Right? Now, I wasn't competing for B2B technology companies. I wasn't competing for other things, but this longer tail term, fewer people indeed were searching for that phrase, but those that were searching for that longer term, longer tail phrase were self-selected, pre-qualified, interested to learn about what we had to say, and were in the market for what we had to offer. So while I think what's new is Google's focusing more than ever on quality content as it relates to measuring your authority, providing non-salesy answers to a prospect's questions, that's going to give you a real big leg up on your competitors versus focusing only on, let's say, selling features or just talking about your product ad nauseum.
I love what you said there about outsmarting, not outspending. And it seems like there's an analogy there between long tail SEO and account-based marketing. You're, as you mentioned, self-qualified, less need to lead score and pre-qualify, those sorts of things, because you're more fishing with the spear rather than the net. In that scenario, I think John Miller recently put it in an episode on ABM. So I think you're sharing some really valuable insights here, Andrew. If anybody listening to this would like to ask any follow-up questions, stay connected with you, maybe learn more about Altitude Marketing and what you guys are doing for other B2B companies, what would be the best way for them to find you guys or reach out to you, Andrew?
Yeah, best way is to hit our website at altitudemarketing.com, and then just look for me in the about section, and you should have my contact, at least my LinkedIn information there. We can start a connection on that front.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate your thoughts on the top 5 marketing trends of 2019 and really, how to tackle them, how to approach them, and sharing some interesting insights. I really appreciate you being on the show, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate the time, Logan. It's good to chat with you, and if there's anything else I can do, just let me know.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. All those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.